I want to start off by welcoming all our viewers from around the globe. Thank you for joining us for today's live presentation entitled Marketing, Selling, and Servicing Your Customers in Times of Uncertainty, with our guest speaker, Diana Zalaquett, Principal Channel Account Consultant and Success Manager from HubSpot. My name is Carolyn Jepson, and I head up the Marketing Communications Department for the World Trade Center Dublin and WebPort Global. The World Trade Center Association fosters the development of international trade with a network of over 320 World Trade Centers in more than 90 countries worldwide. WebPort Global is a cloud-based platform designed to help facilitate global trade by providing business connections, knowledge, and opportunities for all our members. Today's session is brought to you by a collaboration between the World Trade Center Dublin, Boston, Washington, D.C., Barcelona, and WebPort Global. I want to send a special thank you to all our members, colleagues, and friends for tuning into today's international program. Now, I have the pleasure of introducing our sales and marketing expert, Diana Zalaquett. Diana has lived and worked in over 5 countries worldwide with a mission to provide cross-cultural connections and business success for her customers. And I quote, to promote global first. She was nominated as leader for El Mundo's Latino 30 Under 30 Awards. She was a finalist for the MIT Entrepreneur Bootcamp and also is a TEDx speaker. Her company, HubSpot, is an all-in-one platform that includes marketing, sales, and service software that helps business grow without compromise. Their belief is what's good for the business should also mean good for customers. We'd love to hear from you today, so feel free to send your questions for Deanna via the Q&A button, and she will answer those at the end of the presentation. Please note that this session will be recorded. And now, without further ado, Diana, I'd like to turn the screen over to you.
Thank you, Carolyn, and welcome everyone. It's great to have everybody join. It's great to be here, and I appreciate the opportunity to be able to share some really great insights about how to market, sell, and service your customers through uncertainty. So, as Carolyn mentioned, my name is Deanna, and I'm a principal channel account consultant at HubSpot. And this is the agenda for today. We're going to talk a little bit about selling through uncertainty, how to approach your customer conversations now, and what the psychology of selling in uncertain times looks like. We'll also discuss an interesting framework that you may be able to apply to your own process. And we'll also dive into how some marketing strategies have shifted. And we will end the presentation with some key takeaways and resources that you can use to really leave with something actionable that you can apply today. As Carolyn mentioned, a recording will be sent out along with a link to some of these resources following the webinar. So let's begin. Selling through uncertainty. What do we mean by that? This is where empathy comes in. Here at HubSpot, we updated our core values to add empathy as one of them. And we realized that during times of uncertainty, the most important thing is to lead really genuinely with a how are you doing? How are you doing? Not just how is your business doing, but how are you doing personally? And at HubSpot, what we did was created a resource called Adapt 2020, which I'd love to share with you. So once you have a chance and an opportunity to take a look, this is a resource that has a lot of curated content to help you adapt your marketing strategy to today's economy. So you'll be able to find benchmark data, a lot of different blog posts, guides, and kits that will help you when it comes to adapting your sales process, adapting your strategy for retaining your customers, and adapting everything that you're doing in your marketing strategy as well. I'm just going to dive in really quickly into this resource because it's a wealth of information that I recommend all of you to look at. So if you go into this Adapt 2020 site, you will be able to find all kinds of information on what's featured this week, what has been featured in the past, and a lot of additional educational resources along with webinars that you can take a look at when it comes to all of these topics. So going back to selling through uncertainty, let's talk a little bit about the data because without data, it's really difficult to understand what's happening. And before I go into the data and dive deeply into what we've found, I'll just share a little bit about where this data is coming from. These are insights that are based on data from 70,000 HubSpot customers globally, and it includes weekly trend data for core business metrics in 2020. So some of the charts will depict the performance of a given metric against pre-COVID benchmarks, which were calculated using weekly averages starting January 13th, 2020. So it's important to look at at this data over time and to see what has been happening for companies that have invested in an online presence and right now use inbound as a key part of their growth strategy. I invite you to explore the data yourself and take a look at some of the interesting graphs and resources that we have there as well. So let's talk about data for sales outreach. What has been happening with sales outreach? As you can see in this graph, during the week of April 27th, the number of sales emails that was sent from portals dropped 9%. But email send rates are still well above pre-COVID levels. The total email responses also remain stable from last week, from all of the weeks previous to that. And what's important to note here is that while companies with more than 201 employees actually saw an increase in total sends during the week of April 27th, they also saw the biggest decrease in their response rates with an 8% drop. So, what is also curious is that companies with 1 to 25 or 26 to 200 employees had smaller dips at only 1 and 2%. So it's interesting to look at the data here that suggests that an increase in sales activity didn't necessarily result in business generation. What other data can we look at? What about the number of meetings booked? The number of meeting books was trending at around 7% below pre-COVID averages. But over the last few weeks, it's increased to about 10% above pre-COVID averages. This is really great to see. It's showing us that there's a lot more meetings and there's a lot more selling happening, just that it's happening differently. What about deals created and closed? During the last week of April, for example, we saw deals closed increase by 4%. With this boost, of course, our customers closed more deals in the last week of April than they had since the week of March 16th when the economy began to deteriorate. This was definitely a hopeful sign of recovery, and it indicated that we might be trending in a positive direction. And overall, sales teams are still closing nearly 20% fewer deals than before COVID, but there's a sign that the economy is starting to pick back up. The good news is that companies of all sizes have seen an uptick in the deals that were closed. So, this is something that shows us there's a lot of hope for the future, and especially if we're able to adapt to the changes that are coming our way and to the challenges that are presented in front of us. Essentially, we've all been tasked with a challenge, and that is to sell from anywhere, from your home, from your couch, from the stoop, from the basement. And so for that, we created some content, and I'd love to share another set of resources with you for a bunch of you sales pros who I'm sure are in the session today, who are crushing your quotas from your couch or your basement or your living room. And take a look at this website here, where you can experience the remote sales playbook. If you jump into this resource, you can actually select your role and say what you are, if you're a sales rep or a sales manager, and you can ask for help with any of these topics. So for example, let's say I'm a sales manager and I need help prospecting. So I click on the resources tab and it'll take me to a bunch of different resources that you can take a look at on your own time on sales email templates, sales prospecting email templates, how to handle objections, and sales success. All of these resources are here and available for you to take advantage of. So I definitely recommend that post session you take a look at them. So let's move on to the next question, and that is, given all of this uncertainty and given all of the data that we just saw, what is the best way to approach your customer conversations? A lot of you must be wondering, well, I definitely have had to adapt the way that I do things, but I also need to adapt the way in which I communicate with my customers. And we're going to go deeply into the basics of communication with how you should approach your customer conversations. And let's start with one that I believe to be woven in the way the most of you already work. So most of you already work with empathy or lead with empathy. And of course, a lot of your customers may be hurting right now. You may be hurting as well. And so it's important to ensure that your customers feel heard, they feel validated in their conversations, and at the same time that you ensure your customers really feel that you're understanding their challenges more than ever. So today, the relationships that you build with your customers over months and years are going to be really important. We're going to have to flex our emotional intelligence skills over the next months as we help navigate for this difficult time. So I remember actually an anecdote when I was working with an account manager for 2 years that was actually let go. And I remember how difficult it was to talk with them after having built such an important and long-lasting relationship. And I remember getting up from my computer and going for a walk and coming back and just writing an email to the owner, letting them know how excited I was that I was able to keep working with them and help keep turning things around. So these are situations now that we've faced in the past. So be sure to watch for some of the common pitfalls of empathy. So customers really don't want to hear about, you know, others who have it just as bad or worse than them. And it's usually not a great idea to tell them to look at the bright side when they're complaining. So whenever you have a conversation with your customers, my recommendation is don't jump too quickly into problem solving. Being empathetic doesn't necessarily mean solving their problems on the spot. It means really listening. So, besides leading with empathy, another important key is to make your intentions clear. So, when you reach out to your customers, make sure you're upfront about what you want to discuss with them. Their time and their resources are going to be very precious. So, be clear with what you're hoping to accomplish when you get on a call with them, and make sure that you become a source of consistency for your customers. At the end of the day, what will set you apart is the world-class service that you can provide. And right now is a time when your customers are going to be relying on you more than ever. So the third one is your tone. Tone is really important. And while this is always true, we can imagine why it's especially the case now. So when you're emailing or calling your customers, really read the situation and try to match your tone appropriately. Again, this is going to call back to your emotional intelligence and for the need to read people and situations. Of course, this is going to change as time goes on, as you're better able to read the situation and your customers' businesses. But we can also rely on three major categories on where businesses are today. And if we look at these three categories, you'll note that some of your customers may be in the survive stage, while some of them may be adapting and some of them may be thriving. So industries that are in the survive stage are probably all of the travel agencies, anybody that works with events, retail, restaurants. They are the ones that need support most urgently now. What about the adapt stage? These are probably going to be your customers or industries in the technology industry, software, consulting services, and these are the companies that are going to make it or break it in the next 3 to 6 months. So if you're in the adapt stage, it's probably the best time for you to shift gears and think about how you can increase your online presence, how you can digitally transform your business so that you are available, so that you're adaptable, and so that you can create authentic relationships with your prospects and customers. And the third category are those customers in the thrive stage. So it's companies like Zoom, like PandaDoc, like Vidyard, anybody in the e-commerce or e-learning and on-demand industries that are probably really thriving from this time, and they've actually seen it as an opportunity to continue to expand their businesses. So if you're in one of those industries, that's great, and that's a wonderful opportunity to continue to grow and to set the example for other companies that may need your help. So once you know how to approach your customers, it's also important to think about how do I lead the conversation? Essentially, the first thing you want to do is assess the short term. So, what can you do in the next 30 to 90 days that will make the biggest impact? And later on, plan for the long term. So, what should we be doing to plan for a potential recession or for another time of uncertainty similar to this one? That means contingency planning. That means thinking about what if we're faced with a similar situation in the future. So there are three key people that have been given great insight on really how to approach customers in a time of uncertainty and are leading companies that are thriving right now. And these are Jim Donovan, the VP of Sales in PandaDoc, Ben Volkman, Head of Sales in Zoom, and Dan Wardle, VP of Revenue at Vidyard. And they've had some really great insight as to what are some of the different things and strategies that they've applied and learned from. So, one of the things that Jim Donovan said is lean into the silver lining and meet people where they are. So, he shared with us that whenever PandaDoc faced this time of uncertainty, they needed to be sensitive about what was driving new business for them. So, PandaDoc literally, I'm going to say, accentuates the death of the handshake. So we're used to that face-to-face, personable connection that we want to have with people. But essentially, what PandaDoc has introduced to the market is a new way of sending proposals or sales proposals virtually. So they are thriving in this economy right now, but at the same time, it was important for their messaging to be sensitive of the fact that their business is going to be profiting so much from a time of uncertainty for so many. Another really great example is from the head of SMB sales at Zoom. And what he said is don't focus on profit margins, but do focus on how you can help. So, what are some resources you can create that can help your customers? And if you're a company like Zoom, who was able to extend 40 minutes on the platform for free or opened it up for free for all kinds of educators, K through 12, or all education partners, that's great. If there's something that you can provide your customers or prospects for free, and if you can figure out how to teach people things not in person, so thinking about how can you create little micro pieces of content through video to teach people things, and to keep in mind that people now have an attention span that is lower than the attention span of a goldfish. So I'm wondering how many of you know the attention span of a goldfish. And it's funny because it's actually 9 seconds, but humans clock in at 8 seconds. So imagine that. We need to be able to capture an audience's attention in 8 seconds of time. So think about that. How are you doing that today in your strategy? Now, Dan, the VP of Revenue at VideoArt, has told us be the expert and show them exactly how you're going to help them. So for Dan, it was really important to be transparent, to understand your customers and your prospects way more than you did before, and to start getting comfortable selling and communicating over video. Nowadays, it's going to be important to shift that sales process because not a lot of people want to get phone calls. So we've actually seen that a face-to-face request is 34 times more successful. So I encourage you today to turn your video on if you haven't yet when you start selling. Let's move on to the psychology of selling in uncertain times. So one of the interesting things that we looked at here at HubSpot is what are the typical stages of crisis? And it could be that your customers are in a stage of anger and depression and have thought of freezing all of their assets for the next 3 months. Or it could be that they're in a more of a bargaining and acceptance stage where they're open to be proactive and adapt or explore the situation. And you might notice this in yourself. You might notice that initially there was a sense of denial, of avoidance, of confusion, and that turned into a frustration that quickly turned into a depression. And once you were done with being depressed, you decided, well, then there's something I may need to do. So let me reach out to others. Let me tell my story. Let me find meaning in what I'm doing. And finally, the stage of acceptance, where we find that there's more opportunity to explore options. And as humans, we adapt, we accept. So we have new plans in place to move on. It's important to take into account this or the typical stages of crisis so that you can understand the psychology of selling to your customers, the psychology of servicing them, and even of marketing to them. So, one thing I really like to take or pay attention to is what is your customers or your current state and what is your dream state. So, if you think of your business right now and you think of what are you doing today and what you want to be doing today, and think about that middle point where there's that loss aversion. What do you need to be doing today? And this is the moment where most customers buy. So we actually took some data from 2009 during the recession, and we looked at our CRM and some of the comments that our sales reps had put into the selling notes. And usually we have a property that says why they bought. And the typical story was that the recession had hurt their business, that word of mouth wasn't cutting it anymore, and so they knew they needed to use their site for awareness and lead generation. So they started using other tools, like blogging, for example. This is all the way back in 2009. And if we think of it, it's probably happening right now too. So I invite you to draw that timeline and to think about what you're doing today, what you want to be doing, and what you need to be doing that will get you to that want stage. So the first step is to be empathetic. So what do we mean by selling with empathy? Empathy. So essentially, we're all going through an unprecedented time. So what we want to be able to do is put ourselves in the position of our prospects, our customers. We want to be able to understand that they're working from home, they probably have a limited cash flow. We also need to think about empathy versus sympathy. So they're subtle, but they're very different at the end of the day. So it's important to think about being empathetic, but at the same time, being a trusted advisor to your customers. So they look at you for support, for guidance, and for direction. So if you're a trusted advisor, that means you're going to be listening to your customers. You're going to really carry on an in-depth understanding of their challenges, and you're going to be very proactive in your problem solving. And for that, I'm going to share a couple of frameworks that I'm sure some of you may know of or have heard of. And if not, it'll be a great opportunity to learn a new thing or to refresh something that is very, very useful when you communicate. And that's the layer technique. The second one is directional questioning. And the third one is how can we empower our customers to take control? So let's lean heavily on the fundamentals. So when we look at this framework, essentially, we're not using this time of uncertainty as a hook for promotion. So right now, we have to empathize, we have to educate, and we have to understand. And this technique is a great opportunity to deal with your customers when they need some more time to think about it, when you need to be an active listener and acknowledge that we are dealing with unique market conditions right now. So listen, acknowledge, explore, and respond. Let them know that they have the floor, mute your button, show them that you've heard them, ask open-ended questions, and respond only when you've done enough research. Another technique is called directional questioning. So, of course, a lot of us have first level questions that can open up a topic by, helping us reveal thoughts, facts, behaviors, or situations, or questions that help us gain a basic understanding of a subject. So, of course, these questions are imperative to the success of a sale, but they only unveil a very small portion of what is down deeper and the next level. So, these first level questions are important, but they're not enough. So when you use directional questioning, you want to steer the dialogue in a certain direction that another developmental question is uncovered. So think of directional questioning as taking as if you were taking a roadmap of a conversation and you're allowing the dialogue to take another path. And this path is one that's going to uncover your prospect's purpose and their needs. So generally speaking, directional questions are going to move the dialogue from one logical topic to another. They're going to invite another person to participate in exchange of information, and they can be used to replace close-ended questions if you were tempted to ask them in the first place. So when I think of directional questions, I think of can you identify what your customers' goals, plans, and challenges are? So for example, if my challenge is lead generation, I also need to think about my business challenge, which is sales target. So in my role, I'm a marketing manager and I need to generate leads. That is my personal goal. But the business needs to reach their sales targets. So when I'm asking questions, I want to be able to level down to the core of what are the challenges that are keeping that person from generating leads and from reaching the business sales targets. And for that, we continue to ask why. It's always important to continue to ask why to get to the bottom of the challenge. And even then, what else is challenging? This will take you to the next goal, to the next plan, and to the next challenge. So really use this framework to help you approach your customer conversations. To recap, remember the grief cycle, Remember loss aversion and what your customers need to be doing. Remember layer the fundamentals of listening and directional questioning. So let's move on to a framework for marketing, selling, and servicing through uncertainty. And the first thing that I'm going to recommend that you do is that you identify the opportunities or your biggest opportunities. Analyze your current install base and think about what are some of the health and status of the accounts that you have, the customers are your existing customer base. Is there something that you can do to help based on their situation? What industry are they in? Are they somebody that has a very high percentage of recovery? And once you think about your existing customers, what you want to be able to do is to retain them and think about how can I further delight these customers to turn them into promoters of my business. Now, if you think about new business, so I'm selling into new business, I need new business, think about what industry you're going to focus and what industry you're going to sell into given the three buckets that we discussed before. Are you going to sell to industries that are in the adapt or the thrive stage? Perhaps it may be difficult to sell to industries in the survive stage. So it may be important to target your messaging and to change it as well based on the industry impact. So let's take an example. Let's say Carolyn has a restaurant that was, one of the industries that was worst hit. So the challenge here is to analyze how to adapt to the challenge, to provide an individual delivery to the employees working from home. So how can I do this? And in terms of the services, they are needing, or restaurants in particular, to implement a digital infrastructure for ordering, for execution of their orders. And so what kinds of things could help them solve their problem? So it's really important to look into what are the challenges, who can you help, and with what? And how can you be a thought leader for your customers at the end of the day? I also invite you after this session to take an opportunity to role play. So practice with real customer objections. Of course, right now we're facing the most common objections, which are time and money. But an important one that we're facing right now as well is commitment. People are afraid of committing to something because they're not sure or they're uncertain about the future. So it's important for you to practice with real customer objections and try using Zoom, for example, and breakout rooms to practice with your sales team so that they can really practice using the frameworks we discussed to lead a sales process that adapts to the current times. We're going to move on to a really cool topic and something that I hope inspires hope in all of you today, and it's how marketing strategies have shifted. And I know some of you in the audience are in sales, some of you are in marketing, some of you are CEOs and leaders, but all of this data and all of this information is really important to help us stay calm and really help us expand. And just to give you a quick note on the research, a lot of organizations felt the impact of COVID, and many organizations had to shift their marketing strategies out of necessity. So, the research behind this is based on stories from real marketers in all of the different industries that were highly impacted, all of the people's emotions and feelings, and really promoting or looking at where the optimism side is. So, how can we seize the moment and be creative to serve our communities to make a difference? So, take a time to absorb these and to look at the powerful messages behind these. So, what was the methodology used here? We actually worked with different marketers that represented their experiences so that we could understand what were the key themes or challenges that marketers are facing today. So if we summarize it into 6 main challenges, the first one is there's a big need for marketing strategies to be ever evolving and changing. So it's important right now to be able to focus on how can I adapt my marketing channels? What channels do I need to use that I haven't been using before? A lot of importance was noted on increasing your social media presence and as well on thinking about the budgets that we had for all of these live events that we're no longer able to have. So we had a budget for this huge event that we were planning on, but now that we can't do it, what can we use that budget for? And how can we reinvest it to adapt to the new marketing environment? Another one is reaching your customers. It's been very challenged to reach customers right now because marketers and marketing channels are flooded by other organizations. I am sure that if you open your email today, you probably have countless amounts of spam and countless amounts of emails that probably say the same thing over and over again. So marketers are concerned that they can't really virtually reach customers as well, that not only don't check their spam emails, but also aren't tech savvy. So a bunch of different industries are trying to adapt to that technology gap as well. The third one is we need to be able to create relevant and sensitive content now. And so, one of the challenges marketers face today is that they're either directly creating content about COVID or alluding to it. And some of the marketers express that their collateral is facing a lot of extra scrutiny. So, legal departments, externally by people viewing the content, and the tone. So, it's really important to think about if your content is appropriate, and especially keeping in mind the sensitivity of all of the issues happening today. The last three are we're all working with reduced budgets. So, right now, it's important to be cognizant of monetary restraints. It's difficult to be creative. So, right now, it's hard to think about, you know, being creative when you don't really know what's going to happen in the future. And third, we're lacking what we need to be successful. A lot of us have had to shift to work remotely successfully. And, things like internet connectivity can be an issue day in and day out. So it's important to think about these six challenges and how we can respond to them. So some questions that I recommend or you to consider are, if you're in a product team, what if anything in your pipeline could be prioritized to support unique user needs right now? If you're customer facing, what perspectives can you take from these stories that can help you aid your customers? Or how might what you've read impact your conversations with your customers? And for everyone, if there's anything that you share with these participants, is there anything that you can relate to, or how has your role been impacted by these challenges? I'm going to just share a couple of the quotes that I'm not going to read completely because they're quite long, but I just invite you to take a second to read some or part of these quotes and look at what some people are saying in the different industries and how people are feeling. So creating a marketing plan right now has been futile because everything changes day to day. And after every day, I need a large glass of wine. Of course, why don't we all? So thinking about other industries like the travel industry, and some quotes here on what people are saying. Marketing has been more on memories of travel instead of planning for the future. Um, for the travel industry, it's been a huge shift in messaging, and of course for industries in the consumer or packaged goods, uh, we've had to be a lot more cautious about everything we do and what we say, and now we're focused on all things virtual. So take into consideration some of the messages that people are portraying here. And I invite you to think of where can you personally work on? What can you change or adapt, or what have you been experiencing due to these challenging times? Some people in the retail industry, for example, have had to change their 15 events per month and put them on hold until next year. So have you had to do that? And how many of you have had to think about adapting every single moment of your day? So I'm not going to go through all of these again, but I recommend that whenever you have a chance to take a look at all of these industries, you just connect to the responses people are giving us and see if there's something that you can do or take something to inform your current and your future marketing programs. So key takeaways that I want to really dive deeply into are three, and those are: be available for your customers. We are living in a moment where 9 to 5 is no longer enough. So customers are expecting to connect with you 24/7. So do you have the marketing channels or the messaging channels available to be able to connect with your customers? Be flexible in that regard as well. Be adaptable. So how can you shift and transform your strategy to create more awareness on your website? Can you install a chatbot? Can you create lead flows on your website? Can you turn your website into an e-commerce site? And finally, create authentic relationships. At this moment, it's really important to think about your customers and to think about The fact that some industries are going to be are going to be seeing a significant effect on their cash flow in the short and potentially long term. So your goal right now is to help your own business and these businesses that are connecting with you to keep as many aspects of this flywheel as strong as possible. I'm not sure how many of you in the audience know or have heard about the inbound methodology or our flywheel, but to give you a quick overview, at the center of your efforts is or are your customers, surrounded by your efforts in sales, servicing, and marketing, and surrounded by the bigger picture or the methodology, which consists of attracting customers to you and at the right time with valuable content, engaging them and nurturing them through the sales process, adding value before extracting value, and finally delighting your customers to turn them into promoters. So if we follow this flywheel and we take a look at a much more detailed and complex version of it, your goal at the attract phase is to make sure your visitors can find and start to consume your content. At the second phase, you want to make sure that your content begins to build trust with those visitors. Once they trust you enough to give you their information via chat or via a lead ad, for example, it's time to engage with them. And at this phase, you want to be able to nurture them. You want to be able to have a conversation with your prospects and make sure that you're not just selling to them. 90% at least of your content has to be educational, and only 10% should be talking about your own business or about what you sell. And once you're entering the sales process in the engage phase, your focus is going to have to be on helping instead of selling. Once you get that customer, the most important thing that we need to do is to combat buyer's remorse. How many of us have spent a ton of money on something or a product, service that we then got home or the next day decided that, oh, that wasn't the best decision. And we decided that, oh, well, I want to return it or I don't trust that company anymore. So in the delight phase, you want to provide great service and you want your customers to become successful and evolve into a promoter. So think about bringing your visitors to consume content, building trust, nurture those leads into your sales process, which hopefully you will do using video, and that you combat buyer's remorse and evolve your customers into promoters. So at the attract stage, what can you do? You can change your SEO strategy. You should not stop marketing. You should just change your marketing. And perhaps that means you need to review your promotion strategy and lean into things like webinars, for example. So when you engage, you want to change your email strategy, audit any workflows you have, audit your chat and your bot strategy, and also at your sales process, lean into free tools. Can you create best practices for virtual meetings? Can you think about one-on-one video creation to make more connections? And at the delight stage, your goal is to build promoters, to engage the customer base, to lean into social media, lean into automation, and think about time to value. Where can you add more delight? So let's emerge strong from this time of uncertainty and let's have a strategy for your customers in any of the three categories we discussed. So, how are you planning on moving forward once all of this ends? I'm going to end with some resources that you can take a look at, and they're all here available for you. Sell from anywhere, Adapt 2020. You can try Vidyard and Zoom for free. You can also try PandaDoc and our HubSpot CRM and sales tools for free. Finally, I'd love to stay in touch, so add me on Instagram or LinkedIn if you have questions and if you want to further connect. Thank you all so much for your time.
Diana, thank you for sharing your trade secrets to selling and marketing during this uncertain time. It was so timely and informative. Now, let's take a few questions for you. And for those that Diana can't get to today, she will follow up with you via email. So our first question is about culture. How does culture factor into a company's sales and marketing plan?
This is a really great question and one that I think plays a huge role in companies' sales and marketing plans. And like I mentioned in the beginning, if you are adding empathy into your culture, it's going to be really helpful. This is something that we did at HubSpot, for example, and HubSpot has a really great culture. We actually have a culture code and a culture deck, and the first thing that we think about is heart. So when we think about heart, we think about leading with empathy, we think about adaptability, we think about remarkable talent, and we think about transparency. So that's a really big part of our culture, but we also have a customer code that flows into that culture. And when we think about it, we think about things like, if your customers are giving you feedback, act on it. If your customers are giving you data, don't abuse it. If customers need to exit or cancel or leave you, let them leave. So those are just three examples of what our culture code and customer code looks like, but I would definitely encourage you to take a look at HubSpot's culture code and customer code to take a look because it's really insightful.
So informative. The next question, can you give an example of how HubSpot has helped one of its customers to reevaluate their business model to achieve positive results during this pandemic?
Absolutely. There's quite a few examples. I'm actually going to mention one of my current customers that I work with right now, and they are actually a retail company, and they are a very small shop based in Westport, and they actually didn't ever have a website or nor did they have a very big online presence. They just relied on word of mouth to be able to get their leads or get their customers. And so once HubSpot was able to give them access to the free CRM, they were able to digitalize their strategy by starting with keeping their data in a cloud-based software instead of keeping it in an Excel spreadsheet. And additionally, they are looking into creating a new website with the HubSpot CMS. So it's something that they're starting to do because they only had something on Facebook. But then again, they're trying to be more available online, and Facebook wasn't enough. So right now, they've been able to attract more leads into their business and are currently digitally online.
That's great. Great example. This is more of a personal question, but your background, you've accomplished so many things over the course of your career, lived all over the world. What are you most proud of?
That's a good question. So I think really the opportunity to be here in the US and to not only have been able to study here but go to school here was a big opportunity that I'm very thankful for. And I think being able to continue my education and career in a country that isn't my own, it has probably been one of the biggest challenges I faced. And it's been 13 years since I've been or since I got to Boston, and I still can't believe it. So um, I think that would be the biggest one is leaving my home country in Peru to come here to Boston and live and work here.
Wow, thank you for sharing that. And I want to also thank you for sharing all your expertise with our global audience. If you want to connect with Deanna and find out more about HubSpot to help your business grow and succeed in this new business paradigm, please contact her at dzalaquett@hubspot.com. I also would like to send a big thank you to all our viewers. Be safe, be well, and remember, together we can make a difference in trade. Thank you all for joining us today.